David, you want to lead us off?
Sure. Yes. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. David Swan, Calgary Mountain View.
And Bruce McClure from the University of Calgary.
Graham Such of the MLA for Calgary Shaw.
Peter Choate from Mount Royal University.
Rick McIver, MLA, Calgary Hayes.
Cameron Westhead, MLA, Banff Cochrane.
Hi, Gloria Laird, Elder, Métis Elder.
Debbie Jabour, MLA Peace River and Chair.
Good afternoon, Nicole Goring, MLA, Edmonton Castle Downs.
Patty Labucan Benson, Métis Ukrainian.
Good afternoon, Greg Clark, MLA, Calgary Elbow.
Maria Fitzpatrick, MLA, Lethbridge East.
Heather Sweet, MLA, Edmonton Manning.
Jason Nixon, MLA, Rimbey, Rocky Mountain House, Sundre.
So welcome everyone, and as always we encourage the public to attend and observe our panel meetings, and we do ask anybody joining us today who wishes to provide input on what the panel is discussing to please complete the panel submission form handed out today or send an email to cipanel.submissions@gov.ab.ca from one of the laptops outside this room. Submissions to the same email address will be considered throughout the panel process. This meeting is being audio live streamed to the panel website at childinterventionpanel.alberta.ca. So at our last meeting, the panel spent the day in guided facilitation to refine our recommendations to improve the child death review process. Today, we're going to finalize those recommendations and we're going to begin phase 2, where the panel will take a broader look at the child intervention system, where we'll have the opportunity to explore the child intervention system as a whole, engage with Albertans, and come to a consensus on recommendations for improving the system. Our first agenda item will ask panel members to indicate their comfort level with the recommendations included in the revised recommendation provided to panel members last night. Our discussion will include opportunity for panel members to bring forth any outstanding concerns they may have, along with recommended wording and/or solutions that we can consider as a panel. We will strive to reach timely consensus by indicating our comfort level with each of the recommendations and revising where we feel it is necessary. And today we'll also provide our feedback on a draft phase 2 work plan that is based on the dates that we provided. The work plan was developed to provide the information we need to inform our discussions and achieve the objectives in the second phase terms of reference, including background information. Considerations include information on the child intervention program, themes from the panel information requests, tracking from panel meeting and facilitator notes, as well as the information received through the public and staff submissions gathered at the panel meetings and through the email addresses provided. So, we're ready to get to work. And as indicated in my opening comments, our task today is to finalize our recommendations to inform Minister Larrabee in her task of bringing our best advice and timely legislative amendments forward for consideration by our Legislative Assembly colleagues to improve the child death review process in Alberta. So tonight we're going to use a very simple process to validate or indicate a need for more discussion on each of the recommendations. As we move through each recommendation, I will ask you to indicate your comfort level with the recommendation. So based on our last couple of meetings, I'm confident that we're very close to consensus and that our recommendations will make a significant and positive difference to the child death review process in Alberta and the families, communities, and frontline staff who are impacted by it. So, I would suggest we refer then to our page with the recommendations. There we go. So you'll note on the draft, it would be the middle column, recommended statements for panel to consider. So under the first item, the primary authority for the child death review. So based on what you see here as the recommendations, shall we try our little voting system? It's green if you're good with it, yellow if you could live with it, or have some recommended changes, and red if you are not good with it, and again, have some suggestions. So, on the primary authority for the child death review, okay, so, oh, you're holding up both, Jason?
Yeah.
Okay, now in Calgary, I can't quite see your colors, so what I'm going to ask you to do, We're doing a live change the recommendations, and that's why you got that on there. So any suggestions will go immediately into that document. So in Calgary, could somebody just report on the colors?
I think we all had green
You all
here.
got green, okay, good.
Yeah.
So we've got 2 different colors at this table. So do you want to start then, Rick? You've got a,
Yeah, thanks, Chair.
Okay.
I appreciate that. And I passed around our summation of where we think the recommendations as distributed are different than what we agreed with last time. And for the committee's reference, and also passed around pictures of what was actually on the board that we did agree to last meeting, so nobody, hopefully everybody has confidence that what we're talking about is, I haven't tried not to add or take anything away from what we did last time. To be perfectly clear, Chair, everything the committee agreed on last time, I agree with. And as soon as we can get that reflected in the document, and so I'm not asking anybody to change their mind, because I think we're just asking for what we've already always agreed on. That's how everybody understands. I'm not looking for any additional changes.
okay, so what is the specific area then that?
Well, if you look at the document I just passed around to the committee, I think you had it, Chair, and I don't know whether you distributed it the other day to all the committee or not, but the opposition members and the independent members of the committee had it. And concerned with the recommendation, I don't think it was recorded completely accurately on the idea of using methods that increase efficiency, such as aggregate reviews. And the original recommendation of the OCUA must investigate. I'm not sure if that's there.
Rick?
Patty?
You know the piece about the mixed methods?
Yes.
That was actually added to the flip chart after you took the picture.
Okay.
And I was the one that added that after you had taken the picture as a result of the discussion of the group. And I believe it was Peter who had spoken to that issue around, the OCYA has aggregated, for example, in the suicide report, it's not just that it has to be one at a time, but he can look at a pattern or a similar issue in one, and that's what we referred to. Just to be clear, because I know that's my writing on that flip chart, and I remember adding that piece.
No, I tried to take pictures right at the very end, but if you say there was something added after my last photograph, then I believe you.
But I think we could refine the way that it was written so that it more accurately reflects what Peter meant. Do you remember this, Peter?
Yes. So the point I was making was that the advocate has a series of approaches, and we didn't want to tie the advocate to one approach. And I gave the example of the suicide one, of the 5 cases that was done as an aggregate themed review versus the infant sleeping arrangements, which was done as a policy review, versus the Baby Annie report that was done as a single example because of the larger policy implications from the single case. So I think that was the pathway I was trying to lay out in that discussion.
Okay.
All right, so is there a suggestion?
Sorry, Madam Chair, if I may.
Go ahead.
Only because I don't have Rick's handout here that he's been referring to. Oh, there it is. So I would love to just probe into specifics, Rick, just make sure that you're heard to which main changes that you really want to see.
It's what you'll see under number 1 on the document handed out. So they're all numbered according to the one matches the one, so it's easy to compare. And everything on there, if I got it right, is all based on the photographs, which I think you'll probably agree is better than my memory.
So Rick, and I apologize, I'm just a little bit confused finding, so you're saying that this aggregate reviews, and where are you finding this on the draft recommendation piece? I'm just not seeing it.
Yeah, well, that's a little bit harder to do because I looked at the draft recommendations from 3 days ago and the other one I just got, so I haven't had enough time to go through this.
The second one should have any additions are in highlighted, so it should be the same except for the highlighted piece.
Okay.
But they did remove that piece from the second draft.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
And that would have been based on then your recommendation that you had, okay.
Okay. All right, those are my concerns, Chair.
Okay. So is there, do you have a suggestion for how you'd like to see this worded to address that?
Well, I think I heard from Dr. Lavacane Benson that some of the changes are consistent with what was on the board after my last photo, so I accept what she said.
Okay. So then would that change your
Yes.
concerns to a
Yellow.
yellow?
Yeah, for
Okay.
item
Jason?
one. In regards to item one, I think it makes clear that the panel is recommending that the OCYA report to a committee. I think it's not clear within this document, though, that was supposed to be a legislative committee of some sort. That language is not in there. That concerns me. Second is, it's not just that the OCYA should be reporting to the committee, but the OCYA can work with a committee that will be able to compel or to hold the department accountable, similar to PAC, which was what the panel certainly agreed on last week, and that is not expressed in this recommendation, in my view.
Okay. So you would like to see that added? What would be your specific suggestion then?
Well, and I'm like my colleague from Calgary Hayes, I'm at a bit of a disadvantage because there was a second one done, which I do appreciate from the first version down with some of the things that he identified. But certainly I think, and why I say that, Madam Chair, is as I'm looking now at the new one, it does say that it appears it would be an independent legislative committee. But it does not make clear that that committee would have the ability to call upon and question and communicate with the department in regards to the Child and Youth Advocate's recommendations and what's coming forward. And that needs to be clear. So to me, the language could say, the auditor, as the Auditor General recommended, similar to the Public Accounts Committee, something along those lines, but making it clear that this committee's job would not just be to hold the Child and Youth Advocate accountable. In fact, I think that would be one of its smaller jobs. It would be a tool the Child and Youth Advocate can work to be able to utilize to be able to work with the department and hold the department accountable in a transparent way with the public.
Okay, so you're referring to adding a line in that paragraph where it begins, the advocate as an independent officer of the legislature will report to a legislative committee, is that the spot?
Yeah, no, I got it, I'm wondering if it would be more appropriate nearer to the bottom where it talks about the Auditor General recommendation. Unless that sheet that is up there is different than the sheet that is in front of me, and I may be at a disadvantage, Madam Chair, but
Should be the same.
so
Oh, you're looking at the first column, the reference to the Auditor General.
I thought we were talking about item number one, so.
Item number one, first column, so the middle column is the actual recommendation. And then the
Okay,
first column is all the stuff, all the items that were on the flip charts, kind of
Okay.
just scattered there.
Then, yes, it would be somewhere near the top, but it needs to make clear that not only is this a legislative committee, the Child and Youth Advocate, yes, will work with that committee, but it has to, the only way this works is if that committee has the ability, similar to PAC, to be able to call upon department members to answer questions in regards to recommendations associated with Child and Youth Advocate's reports. I see my colleague, Mr. Clark, may have a suggestion on the wording, and maybe I will refer to him, because if he does, I'd be happy to hear it.
Yeah, because I excuse me, I agree that this is something we ought to see happen. I guess I'm just curious, now that we're all looking at the same thing, if we're looking at the paragraph that reads, the advocate, as an independent officer of the legislature, will report to a legislative committee. with the appropriate mandate to ensure accountability. So when I see the words legislative committee, I think the standing committee is the legislative assembly. Perhaps we can put the word standing committee in there, and that would be families and communities probably. Seems to make the most sense. And those committees then have the ability to compel, testimony is probably the wrong word, but appropriate mandate to ensure accountability. I guess I'm wondering if there's something further beyond appropriate mandate to ensure accountability that you feel would be stronger?
No, I'm comfortable. In fact, the wording that I don't know who's typing on the screen, but I think they were close to what both you and I were saying, Mr. Clark. And I would go as far, though, as possibly, though I'm not willing to die on this hill, referring to something similar to the Auditor General's recommendation in that sentence, or referencing the Public Accounts Committee as a good example to make it clear to the department staff what we're trying to say, because that's essentially what we're trying to say. We're not asking for PAC to do it, but we're asking for a standing committee with the same level of authority of PAC, but associated with this particular issue.
Okay, and a request for those of us who don't have very good eyes, can we make this bigger? Because none of us can see what's up there, except Jason, apparently.
I got young eyes, I guess. Thanks, Madam Chair. I appreciate that.
You've got glasses on.
That's right.
It's better, but I don't know. You guys
Well, I
make
put my
that up?
glasses on, so it's better now.
Okay. Or perhaps somebody can read it out. Jason, you got great eyesight. You want to read that?
It says, the full sentence would say, the advocate, as an independent officer of the legislature, will report to a standing legislative committee with the appropriate mandate to ensure accountability, as per, and then the new stuff in yellow says the committee can also compel department members to respond to questions and present information. I would say on the as per, I don't know if that's what you're trying to go as per the Auditor General's recommendation maybe, and that would be probably enough to give a framework to the people that they would know what we were trying to say.
Okay.
And that was the only concern I have with item 1, other than what my colleague from Calgary Hayes already put forward, and I think we've addressed that.
It's been addressed, okay. So can we do another little card vote now with this amendment? How does everybody feel about it? Okay. And do you have anything further, the 2 yellows that you want to suggest a change, or you just want to live with it?
I'll live with it. Live with it.
Okay. Let's move on then to the next recommendation, which is the accountability piece. So, we'll do a vote on the accountability piece. If you want a second, oh, sure. I guess I could read it out, but. Accountability, ensure a child death review recommendations follow the SMART approach, and that they're specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time sensitive.
Are we voting
Are we
again?
ready?
Is that-
Okay, let's vote on it. In Calgary, are you all, there's a red in Calgary?
1 yellow.
Oh, 1 yellow?
Yep.
Okay. And I think we've got 2 yellows here. I'll let you go first, Bruce.
And the one thing that stands out as missing from all of this, and I've kind of gone through it again and I didn't have the total recommendations that people had put together for the Calgary meeting the last time that we met. But when I went through it again for the final kick at the can, what I saw was the one issue about reporting is not clear and present in any of the recommendations. And it might fit well under accountability. And current reporting really provides conflicting and confusing messages to the public. And so this confuses medically fragile children that pose a high risk. fatal accidents that reflect no wrongdoing for any caregiver, a fatal case of child abuse and neglect for kids being served within their own home, fatal cases for kids that are being served in a foster or group care program, and then youth suicide. And these are all very separate things. However, the public and the press kind of understand this as being one thing. So I think somewhere under accountability, we need to, talk about something that would establish protocols for public and public reporting on child deaths that are preventable, with some clear definitions of what that would be. And there's kind of for number 43 under the updated draft of suggestions that people have put together, there's kind of an example there that they can look at later on. But anybody should be able to look, online or in a report and say that there were 4 child fatalities that occurred in the home as a result of child maltreatment, 2 that occurred in foster care, and that's a different story than there's 157 child deaths that are happening over a period of time.
Are you speaking to the similar statistics we saw early on when we were meeting with the Office of the Child and Youth Advocate, where basically letting the public see what we saw? Is that what in that meeting?
Well, I think, even taking it a step farther, that the public reporting should talk about preventable deaths that would be suicides, child abuse or neglect that occurs in the home, or child abuse or neglect that occurs in the care of child welfare. Because right now it gets described as in the care of child welfare, which means a lot of different things to different publics.
So what you're saying is that the way they describe the deaths is too broad?
You bet. It includes things that are not preventable in a total that people will worry about, and rightfully so. So we have to be clear on the terms of reference of what a child fatality under the care of child intervention would be.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I thought we'd used the terminology of preventable deaths, because I think we did talk about that. So what would be your suggestion then? You'd want to add some more definition around that
For
in
adding
this piece? Yeah.
preventable death?
Or for adding the criteria for the reporting? What would be, do you have a suggested wording that you'd like to propose?
Criteria would be fatal cases of child abuse and neglect for kids being served in their home, fatal cases of child abuse and neglect for kids being served in the care of child intervention, and youth suicide during or following a lengthy period of time in care. Those are, in my mind anyway, all preventable deaths.
Okay.
And then you're also then going to have a non-preventable category, which is going to be medically fragile.
Medically fragile children posing a risk for fatal accidents that occur that reflect no wrongdoing on anybody. A child was riding their bicycle and they were hit by a car. They were properly supervised. It meant no lack of supervision.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be counted in the same category. So those are 2 examples. Their child intervention might be able to identify others, but those would be kind of the bare minimum from my point of view.
So that creates 5 categories, correct?
Okay, have we got those changes up on the screen? I thought we did, and then they disappeared. And I can't see that far.
With control.
There we go. All right. Okay, so do we want to maybe just do a vote on this recommendation alone? Okay.
Yep.
And is yours related to that same one then? 'Cause we can.
This recommendation, no,
Yeah.
that's fine. We can-
Yeah, I wanted to maybe just, let's deal with this recommendation, and if everybody's in favor of this.
The only
do you have a comment?
the only apprehension I have is would this make it too cumbersome? Like, would we be providing people with 2? Is there a way to broaden this so it's to provide people with the accurate information? However, still providing them with more clarity on the types of deaths. Like, I just want to make sure that this reporting is achievable. That's the only sort of reluctance I have in that piece. Sorry, I'm not sure if I was supposed to speak before I voted or not.
That's okay,
Sorry.
because I can't really see you guys anyway, so you may have to just sort of jump in that way. Cam, you had a comment on this piece?
Yeah, thanks. I tend to agree with Graham, just in the sense that I wonder if this, and I agree with Bruce too, that these distinctions need to be made, but I just wonder by the wording that we've landed on here or are suggesting might be a bit too prescriptive for the OCYA. Can we make
Can we zoom out just so I can see the full wording there? Because I'm only seeing a segment of it.
Can we use Bruce's suggestion but kind of make it a little more broad and say that we want the OCYA to distinguish between preventable and non-preventable deaths and provide categories for those?
Like preventable, non-preventable, and subcategories there?
I would see that there are two categories, and the overall number that are being talked about would be the preventable deaths. And they should be able to break it down. Because otherwise, people will say that child intervention failed, and kids are dying in the care of child welfare, which is a real critical issue. But in the care of child welfare might mean they're being served at home, right? They could be served in foster care, or they could be served in a group care. And these are all really different things. So I think we need somewhere to establish some protocols that would differentiate between the preventable, non-preventable, and there might be a better word to describe that, but those are the constructs I'm trying to get at when I talk about it. So we can always wordsmith it after, as long as we're okay or not okay with the construct itself.
Yeah, well, my main concern too, and I look at this in a public media perception, is that it's very important, and I actually agree with you in many respects, that we need to break down how these deaths occur versus preventable versus non-preventable. But if we have too many subcategories, people are going to start, the media and the public is going to start lumping everything back into preventable versus non-preventable versus is looking at sort of trying to categorize how they've occurred. And then we run into those issues with public perception again.
Sure, but I think I want to both agree with Graham and disagree with Graham because from a public policy point of view, from an oversight point of view, knowing that the deaths are occurring in the homes of the child as opposed to in homes operated by or on behalf of child intervention. Those are very different public policy issues, and from an accountability oversight perspective, that difference matters, I think, a great deal. I think we could probably create another 5 subcategories, and I agree with Graham, you can go too far on this. But I think that this division is actually quite important in terms of how services are delivered and who's delivering the services and in what kind of environment are the children dying.
And I think this is going to be very, very important in stage 2 as we begin to look at the relative merits of keeping kids at home, ultimate safety for kids, and those kind of orientations towards child intervention that are kind of driving some of the material that we're reviewing right now. So we can always come back and revisit, but I think we need that clarity. Otherwise, we'll be coming back to do another review in 3 years' time because the bigger number is getting taunted or thrown out in the press again. And we need to be clear, there's a smaller subset of preventable deaths that we need to focus on.
Okay. I'm concerned we don't want to get caught up in too much wordsmithing too, because we have very limited time. Greg, you had a comment?
Very briefly, I just agree with Bruce and think that the way this is written captures very much exactly what I believe, which is use these distinctions, preventable versus non-preventable deaths, period, for example, and then some examples. So I don't think that we've limited what the categories might be, but I think we've enabled. I like this a lot, and I also just think one of the most important things we can do is to focus in on the right areas. Because unfortunately, some children are going to die in our society. Some of those children are in care, some of those children are not in care. And that's truly sad, but that's not something that frankly anyone can do anything about. A child may get grievously ill with cancer. That's going to happen. But what I think the public would expect of us is that we're focused on preventable deaths, and as the OCYA ought to be as well. So in my mind, this gets us where we need to be.
Okay, so how is everybody feeling about the proposed camp?
Sorry, I agree with Greg, but I just wonder, like, I don't want to, I think we should leave those the subcategories to the OCYA to consider.
I mean, I think that it's a for example. I don't think that we've told the OCYA that he can't use other categories, nor must he use these categories. These are some categories, and I look at them and think this is a pretty good grouping, but I don't feel that we're being overly prescriptive, nor do I feel like we're limiting the office of the OCYA to choose something different. But I do think it's important that we also identify some of what we think a preventable death is versus what is a non-preventable death.
Okay, so that change that we've got up there, and with it being as for example, how's everybody feeling? We want to hold up the cards?
Super enthusiastic.
Oh my God, consensus.
I think we got consensus. I'm seeing green.
Hey.
Wonderful.
Great.
All right.
Sorry, are the three examples the ones that we've already talked about? Suicide, fatality in the home, or fatality in foster care?
Yes.
People around here are saying yes. I can't see it; it's too far away for me. But those that can see it say that's the case. Okay, good. Let's move on then to the next person who had a yellow concern. Jason?
My concern is near the end. I think we have done a good job, or the author of this has done a good job of getting the cultural lens component in there. However, we talked about this last Thursday, and again, Ms. Sweet did a good job in Calgary a few weeks ago of emphasizing the need for cultural, but also emphasizing the unique component that we have here in Canada, and the fact that we have on reserve and off reserve issues, and we wanted to work that into the lens and beyond just culture, and I think that's important. So I would suggest going back to that language. I don't have the picture. I could look through Mr. McIver's pictures, and I will probably have the exact wording shortly, but that's why I have my yellow card up.
Okay, so you would suggest adding ensure all recommendations and resulting changes include a cultural lens in that sentence? You
Yes.
wanted to add something about on-off reserve?
I want the recommendations, and whoever is making the recommendations to have the ability and to be almost prompted to make sure that they're comfortable making recommendations that may be unique for on-reserve versus off-reserve, and recognizing the uniqueness of that situation. I think the card said, I know the card said, because I have a picture of it, thank you very much, Mr. McIver, all recommendations from the death review have an on/off reserve lens to ensure First Nations, Métis, Inuit lenses recognized and implemented.
Sorry, Madam Chair, if I may. We were just looking here, and it looks like, isn't that on the top of page 4? Ensure all recommendations and resulting changes include a cultural lens to help guide implementation.
That's not enough, is what I'm saying. A cultural lens is not enough, in my mind, for the Indigenous community in our province. Well, I think we need the cultural lens language there, because that encompasses all cultures that may interact with the system. I think we really clearly talked several times during this process that reserves and First Nations communities are even high, I don't want to say higher priority, but are a priority within our system, and recognizing that, and recognizing that some recommendations may work off reserve that will not work on reserve, and that there should possibly sometimes be 2 recommendations associated with circumstances that will work there. And I think we were very clear as a group that we thought that was important, and I still think Ms. Sweet was correct, so I'm fighting for an NDP amendment
Okay,
today.
so that, and that's the item, it's in the left column, all recommendations from death review. So it is here, it's reflected on the left-hand side.
Yes, but it's not in the
Okay.
recommendation.
It's not,
It is,
okay.
It is, actually. yeah.
So,
Where?
I'll hear from Cam and then Patty, just on some suggested changes here.
So in page 3, in the middle column, the first big paragraph there, the last sentence says, implementation realities across cultures and communities, particularly as they relate to funding disparities on and off reserve.
Where?
On page 3, middle column, it's the highlighted paragraph at the top.
So again, that's one of the changes that were made. Again, thank you, Mr. McIver, for your hard work on that, because that's another change that's been put in. But it's only funding.
That's
Yeah.
the issue. The on and off
Can we just
reserve,
say-
I think we said that reading back to the pictures, that all recommendations have an on and off lens.
So can we just take out funding? Take out
Yes,
funding.
yeah, actually, if you took
Just
out
take the word funding
took
out?
the word funding out to relate to disparities, then I think actually, yeah, that's a very nice improvement.
Okay,
Yeah.
that would work for you, Jason? Take
I
the word
would
funding out?
be very comfortable with that. Thank you very much, Mr. Westhead, for recognizing.
There you go, we're collaborating and reaching consensus, I love it. Patty, did you still have a comment?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, so everybody, let's do a quick vote on this change.
Green.
Okay, we got all greens here. Calgary, all greens? Perfect.
Yeah, I'll agree.
Perfect, okay, and Rick, you still had a yellow concern?
No, we've, along the way, we
We've
picked up
sorted it out?
what I was, the other committee members picked up what I was wanting to, so.
Okay, perfect. So let's do one more vote then on the accountability item as amended. We've got all greens. And all greens, we have consensus. Moving on. Timely review process. Okay, give everybody a half a second to find their spot, and then we will go. All right, are we ready to vote on the timely review process? Hold up your card. Okay, I am seeing one yellow here and one yellow in Calgary, two yellows in Calgary. Correct? Okay, we'll have Peter go first.
I thought that we had agreed that we were looking for a general time frame that the OCYA would complete a review. And I know we went back and forth at 12 months and 18 months, but I thought that we had spoken about a time frame, and then if they weren't able to meet that time frame, we had an obligation to come to the legislative committee and to report why it was that they weren't able to achieve that time frame. And that was, and then in addition, we did talk about the barrier for a criminal investigation. But I thought we had a different discussion that said a 12-month time frame for a report, and if not achievable, then reporting to that legislative committee.
Madam Chair?
Jason, was your,
That's my yellow
was yours
as
as well?
well, but Peter, I actually believe, and I think the pictures will show me correct when I get to it, is that we actually agreed on 6 months. And that would be the deadline, but we provided an avenue that if it wasn't accommodatable because of criminal investigation or something along those lines, that it could then be extended, but it had to be reported why it was being extended. Criminal investigation has to be extended. But also that we wanted to leave the ability for certain recommendations to be made even at the 6-month timeline if it didn't interfere with the reason why the full report could not be completed. Because one of the things I noticed, and I think we were talking about in fairly great detail, is often because the report has to wait so long because of the criminal investigation, we end up with some recommendations that could have been put in at 6 months or a year that, quite frankly, could save a child's life, but would not have interfered with the criminal investigation. That's how I remember it. And I will go through Mr. MacGyver's excellent pictures and prove myself right or wrong shortly.
Okay, Cam, you had a comment on this area?
I completely agree that the timeliness is a crucial factor, but I hesitate to think that we might actually be able to get consensus around the table about what that timeline
Well,
specifically.
we had it last Thursday.
Right, so just let me finish. I think that the 6-month timeline that you're referring to was that it would report, when the OCYA would be reporting to the committee every 6 months, and that there would be reasons for delays that the OCYA would be reporting. So it's not that the report needed to be completed in 6 months, but that the OCYA would report to the legislative committee every 6 months.
Sure.
Yeah.
I didn't catch the end of that, sorry,
Okay.
Cam.
So it's not this. I agree that the 6-month thing was discussed, but it wasn't that the reviews would be done in 6 months, but that the OCYA would report to the legislative committee every 6 months. And in that report, the advocate would explain the reasons for delays in that report, the 6-monthly report.
Well, I think first, let's be clear, it says must report. They must report every 6 months, not an option. I don't think that we intended it to be an option, I thought.
Right.
Okay, so we're in agreement on that. And I will concede that on the pictures, it doesn't say one way or another. It was my recommendation, so I know my intent was that I didn't want to see it go past 6 months unless there was a reason why, and then the advocate would have to report it. But I am willing to compromise in order to get consensus if we can. But I just don't feel the language is clear enough on what we're trying to say in regards to 6 months, at the very least.
So I just want to be clear that that's how I read that paragraph. To ensure accountability for timeliness, the OCIA will provide an update every 6 months to the appropriate legislative committee as to the status of all active reviews. So that seems to me that we get it every 6 months. And it also says proceed in a timely manner unless interfering with the criminal investigation. So as I read that recommendation, which is rather succinct, I think it addresses everything that I've heard as a concern here, and certainly meets what I would expect.
Well, there's some other yellow cards in Claire, so I want to hear what they say for sure.
So what I think is missing is a statement that would indicate that we have an expectation that whenever possible, the internal and external reviews are completed within a year. That should be the goal. Now, if there are conflicts, like the medical examiner doesn't provide information quickly enough, or there's a criminal investigation, then the reporting kicks in. But I think we should give the internal and external review processes a goal, at least. It's not clear that we would expect that you are working towards a 1-year wrap-up of internal and external review. That the staff told us that they would like it to be a shorter time frame. Certainly the families would appreciate that 1-year framework. So if our committee or panel is okay with that, can we just make a statement about our expectation of what they're working towards?
So, Madam Chair, I could support what Patty's proposing. I think that would address some of my concerns, particularly if we still kept the 6-month update and then left it with the goal that we were saying that whenever possible, we want this completed for the people involved in a year, recognizing that there are circumstances that would not allow for that to happen, and that's where the 6-month review and update process so there'd be an accountability mechanism so the people involved can say, well, this is why this has not been complete, we're waiting, and we'll be back to you again in 6 months.
Okay, so if you look at the wording on the screen, is that reflective of?
Well, no, because now we've lost the 6 months altogether, but other than that.
Underneath in the paragraph.
Oh, there it is.
It's there.
Sorry.
Your eyes aren't as good as you thought.
No, they're not. I could live with that.
Cam?
Yeah, I think, if we frame it as as a goal, you know, we can't bind the OCYA to that, but yeah.
Okay, Calgary, did you have any other comments on this piece before we vote?
My point would be to get rid of whenever possible and just state that the internal, external reviews should be completed within a year.
I can also live with that.
And then your fallback position is, if it's not, then report back every 6 months on why not.
Any, Cam?
I just don't know if this is, you know, without having the ability to talk to the OCYA, giving them this recommendation that's so stringent. I mean, none of us disagree that timeliness is important. We all agree to that. I'm just worried that this is a bit too prescriptive in terms of binding the OCYA and perhaps giving the advocate an unrealistic goal that they might not be able to meet.
Greg?
I don't think you ever hit a target you don't set. And I think that if the OCYA comes back and says, well, here's 10 reasons why we can't, then perhaps we can remove 5 of those reasons or whatever. It's a resource issue, it's others. But I really think it's important that we bind, that we make the recommendation. It's a year, it's a recommendation, and strive for that. And if there's reasons it can't be achieved, then let's hear what those are and we can set to work on fixing those reasons. Otherwise, it's going to stay at 4 years.
That isn't good enough.
That's not good. You gotta, let's be bold here.
So the concerns were, because I can't quite see it, the original wording that suggested that kind of we had some general agreement was, if possible, was that how it was? Somebody maybe read that line for me?
No, it should be done, not if possible, it should be done within a year. It's not a must be, but should.
Okay, so it's been changed now to, what does it currently say? Just
It
It
should
says
be.
the internal and external review should be completed within a year.
Doesn't say must.
Okay. So,
Should be.
should be?
So,
All right, so is that,
Yeah, and it'll be reported on every 6 months, so shouldn't be a big surprise in cases where it's not done in a year, because the 6-month report should give everybody a hint that this could get slowed down because
may
of
take longer?
criminal investigation or what have you.
Okay, Cam?
Yeah, you know, I agree with the sentiment around the room, but I think I'm just concerned about giving the OCYA a realistic time frame, and we haven't had a chance to speak with them about that. So I don't think I can live with landing on a specific date as a prescriptive measure, but I could accept it as a goal.
Let's vote.
So like having the wording as it was before,
I don't think that's.
I'm sorry, I can't recall what that was, but it was.
Whenever possible.
Yeah, whenever possible, thank you.
so
With a goal of a year, I think.
I have 2 challenges with the language. Number 1 is must proceed in a timely manner. I don't think means anything, so I'm not sure why it's there. Whenever possible, the internal and external review should be completed within a year. A year from when? What's the starting, when does the clock start ticking?
That's a good point.
I think the implication is a year from death.
Well, let's be clear.
I agree.
Yeah.
And if you have a year from death, then I don't think the must proceed in a timely manner is that helpful. So I think it should be child death reviews whenever possible, should be completed within a year from the death of the child, unless a criminal investigation prohibits completion, or something like that.
Agreed.
Okay, Cam?
Well, we
Sorry?
do what Bruce said. Maybe they are, okay, perfect. Just making sure.
Did I hear you say perfect, Jason? That's.
No, I didn't say perfect yet. What Bruce, or what Peter said is perfect.
Okay.
No, it's not on the record, luckily for me, 'cause you guys didn't keep a record.
We keep notes.
Okay.
Okay, so what do we got on the screen there? Whenever possible, the internal. I can't see that.
Whenever possible, the internal and external reviews should be completed within a year from death unless a criminal investigation prohibits completion.
Okay.
Vote. Let's vote.
You ready to vote on that
With about 2 eyes in
phraseology?
the room.
Vote on that piece.
Okay,
I just have
vote.
one addition, I'm
Sure.
sorry. It says, to ensure that we're responsive, can we also say, to ensure the system is responsive to new learnings and to the grieving process
Oh, yes.
of the families? Because that's the other piece of this.
Yeah, I agree.
And not, maybe not responsive, but, and in, what am I trying to say?
And
There's-
respect to the
in-
grieving
with res-
process?
Yeah. And with respect to the grieving process of the families. Thank you.
Respect to the grieving process,
Okay, is that
I-
in there now?
The only thing is maybe it's for grammar perspective, but you might need to actually take out all child death reviews to make it make sense. I'm just waiting for it to stop moving. Okay. Yeah.
yeah. It's just reflective of the grieving process. And the word all.
Yeah, I think there's something, I think the intent's there, I just think it doesn't make sense. I don't know what to say.
Just take it, whenever possible.
And I think you're
You're
just going
saying if
whenever
you took out
possible.
the words all child death reviews, it would make as much sense, it would make more
I
sense.
just,
The in the middle, that doesn't need to be there. Child death reviews
We don't
where
need to
possible.
wordsmith, do we, guys?
no.
And that's, yeah, I'd like to avoid the
There's people who are
wordsmithing.
good at that.
Okay, so, are we good with what's up there? Let's have a vote. Okay. And I've got a few yellows now. So does that mean anybody else holding up a yellow card that wants to take a stab at changing what's there, or are you gonna just agree to live with it?
I'm willing to live with it, but I just wanted to note that, you know, I just want it to be a goal rather than a prescription.
Okay. All right, then, we're ready to move on. Were there any other, I lost track, Rick, did you have a yellow card up on
No,
this
I did
piece that
not.
hasn't been dealt?
No, I
You
did
were- You were
not,
good, all
sorry.
right. I'm so happy. And we've dealt with all the other yellow card concerns on this item?
I had a yellow. I was just concerned with the timeline, the 1-year timeline. Might be unrealistic, but I can live with how it
Okay.
is.
All right, so we're moving on. The next item is accessible, inclusive family supports. Are we ready to vote?
Give it a minute if you don't mind.
Okay.
I don't want to hold you up, I just.
Okay.
All right, everybody's ready to vote on this one, on the accessible inclusive family supports? Okay, I'm seeing greens.
Sorry.
And one yellow here, and in Calgary, I see one yellow. Bruce, that was you, do you want to go first?
At the risk of being a consistent advocate for the ban designate, are we, we've included a lot of people in that. Why not include the ban designate? Highlight the fact that they have been overlooked for many years.
Heather, did you want to comment on that?
Sure, can.
Sorry, thought I saw your hand. I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No, that's okay. I just, so when we talked about the band designate in Calgary, the reason that the band designate was not included, from what I understood, was from our consensus, was the fact that not every First Nations community has a band designate, and that there was actually going to be consultation done with our First Nations communities around how and who it would be that they would like to have included. And so I think the intent was that we were going to consult with our First Nations communities, and that it was covered under the cultural component, because we didn't want to put band designate in there knowing that not every First Nations community has a band designate, and so it could potentially create a loophole.
Okay, any, yes, Cal?
Would the language where possible help alleviate that concern? Heather? Or Dr. Swan?
Maria, did you have?
I can live with that.
And does it get where possible?
Actually, the conversation that I remember is exactly what Heather said. Because there isn't a band designate in every single band, that's why we weren't going to have it.
Sure.
And I do recall a consultation piece that we had decided on as well.
Can
So.
we include the band designate where appropriate?
Where appropriate? Would that wording work for you, David?
Yes, that's great.
I think you're thinking when available, not appropriate. We're not saying whether a designate is appropriate or not, but when the designate is available.
When they exist.
Good point.
Yeah, that's a good
When
point.
applicable.
Applicable, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, when applicable.
Say it again.
When applicable, when available, when applicable, when it's there.
Okay, we've got the wording up there, band designate when applicable. Okay, do you want to vote on that change? You ready? Okay. Okay, I'm seeing lots of greens. All greens in Calgary now? Good. Okay, now do we have any other yellows in Calgary on this section? Or is that the only one? Okay, and there was a yellow here. Rick, did you have a yellow on that one?
Yeah, a couple little things, well, one's, I think, bigger than the other. The one place in the column it talks about, it says monitored by the OCYA, and in the middle column it says the OCYA will advise all families engaged in the child death review process. So that's probably close enough that I could live with that just fine. But the one piece missing off the photograph is when someone is responsible. It says ensure there's a public face that supports the families, possibly the OCYA, and it talks it was something that I brought forward, which is probably why I'm taking your time on it now. Is that when the families need that care, and we talked about it, that someone be identified as being responsible to give them that care. And I think for A, then it'll get done if it's somebody's job. And B, if the family is connected to one person to connect them to government, they don't feel like they're getting the runaround. You know what I mean? You ever phone the phone company? Hold please, hold please, hold please, and you just say, I wish I was talking to Deborah, I wish I could talk to Deborah again, because she seemed to know what she was talking about. And if the families had someone responsible, then they wouldn't get that, I'm getting a runaround from the government feeling. They would be, okay, Deborah had to go and get other information, but she went and got it, she's back to me, and I already know and trust and kind of like Deborah, so I'm happy I'm talking to her again because I don't have to start over. So I don't know where we fit that in, but having someone responsible to talk to the family. If we can find a place to put that in, I'd be great.
Okay, so have we got an attempt up there, it looks like?
Yeah, not only someone, one person when possible. And it may not always be possible, but when there is
A designated
possible,
individual?
yes, one casework person. And with all due respect, if I was a family, I just want a person I can talk to, whether it's a caseworker or a doctor or somebody that does witchcraft, as long as I can talk to the same person. Monday is Tuesday is Wednesday, you know what I mean?
Don't put witchcraft.
Now you got me thinking about this witchcraft idea here.
Sorry, and I apologize, but that was meant to be an extreme example
Yes.
where the person is more important than their particular skill set.
Okay. So it looks like we've got something up there. Designated individual. Does that work for you, Rick?
Yes, it does, thank you.
Okay, so let's vote on that change. Lots of greens. Greens, are we green in Calgary? Okay,
Green, yes.
good. So we'll do one last vote then on the accessible inclusive family supports, just to make sure everybody's good with all of the revisions. And we've got consensus. Impressive. Well done. Okay, so the next item is culturally competent reviews. And everybody ready to vote on this one?
You're pushing pretty hard there, Chair.
Trying to respect our
20
time
minutes
here.
left.
Okay, in Calgary, we've got, looks like greens. Okay, I think we got all greens in Calgary. And we got one yellow here so far. Okay, Jason, you want to talk about your yellow?
Yeah, and I'm trying to read it since it's been changed, Madam Chair, but and I might be nitpicking, and I'm not trying to. But my understanding of the conversation around this, particularly Patty, actually, I believe, was pushing to make sure that there would be a cultural representative part of the process. And my understanding from what she was asking was that they would be a member of the review team, not just a resource to that group. And the way I read this recommendation is that is not what it says. But maybe, like, through the engagement of a cultural representation to support the review, or, so let me ask Patty then, were you looking for somebody specifically from that culture to always, you know, the group that the Child Youth Advocate puts together to do the review would always include somebody, or that they would refer to an expert? Yeah, because I think those are two different things. And so first I just want to see what your intent was before I argue for it.
Well, thank you. I was thinking about the Family Violence Death Review Committee and how they bring in cultural experts to advise the committee. They don't necessarily have those people sitting on the committee proper, but they will bring in people who have deep and personal knowledge of the culture to advise on how this could have happened, the circumstances of the situation. And so I would be willing to say that what they had was okay, that cultural representation, expertise to advise. The only caveat is that that expertise is reflected. It's, you know, that they need to take this expertise and it needs to be reflected in the report. So if the committee, if the panel thinks that it should be the person as a member of the team, I'm okay with that. If we're okay with expertise to advise the process, I'd be okay with that too.
I think, assuming Patty's comfortable with it, I could live with the wording the way it is. I was just asking it more to make sure that we had it right. The one question, and I'll just read it real quick, Madam Chair. Did somebody else have a yellow, or am I the only person?
I think you were the only person.
Okay, that's not abnormal, it's okay. I go against the tide. I just want to make sure that we're reflecting in the bottom wording enough to make sure that they're going to also participate. But it says including in drafting the report, but are we making it clear that we want a cultural lens on that report? Maybe we are. All right.
Yeah, we could end up wordsmithing here.
I could live with it, yeah, I don't want to get wordsmithing.
Okay.
I think if Patty feels we met the intention of what she was saying, then I'm
all right,
happy
we're good
to
with that?
agree.
Okay.
And if I may, the fact that the first column has exactly what we said, whoever is going to finally wordsmith this at least knows what our intention was. And one would hope that that would be reflected in how it's wordsmithed, right? So, a little trust. You can do it. I know. But,
Have you seen the last one?
yes, I did.
Trust but verify, right?
Trust
So-
but verify, yeah. Well, Reagan.
Okay.
Wise guy.
All right, do we need to do another, let's just do another vote. On this one, the cultural competence, we're all green. Okay. Calgary was all green the first time around.
Sorry, can we see the wording again, please?
It never changed.
It didn't change.
Oh, I saw it.
So you're good with the wording the way it was? Okay. Okay, everyone here is green, we're good to go. So we can move on. Information sharing.
It's 10. Very potent.
Okay, ready to vote? All right, we've got greens and we've got one yellow. Calgary?
2 yellows.
2 yellows in Calgary?
No, Rick had a yellow.
Sorry.
All green.
All green in Calgary. My eyes are really going on me here. You've got a yellow wall. When you hold the green up, everything looks yellow to me. And we've got 2 yellows here. Okay, so Rick, do you want to speak to the change you'd like to see?
I put the yellow up because you're going so fast I didn't have time to look at it. I need to hold a spot for me.
Okay, then Jason.
I'm trying to play nice in the sandbox. And not hold things up, all right? So.
Okay, well, we'll go to Jason first, and then you can take a little extra time.
I have no issues with the way it's worded, and the reason I just put the yellow up is just real quick to ask the group whether we needed some sort of a timeline on this, or we were just going to leave it blank. Like, are we recommending that we hope that this will be complete in a year, 10 years, 5 years? That, or is the idea that it's ongoing? I mean, maybe you're right, Heather. Like Rick, I'm just trying to read it while holding a spot, but.
Well,
Okay, any, Maria?
yeah. The second paragraph does say, develop recommendations to improve timeliness of information sharing and achieve efficiencies through the review government services and service delivery agencies. So that's that is the recommendation.
That's completely separate from the audit, though, and so we do specify that we're asking for, so I agree with you on the second paragraph.
Yeah.
But we do specify audit existing communications. We're tasking, or we're recommending that something as specific as an audit takes place. One, do we need to see that before we're done our process? I suspect not. But as Rick says, trust but verify, I just don't like how open-ended that is. If we're asking for an audit, we should recommend to the minister how much time until that should be complete. I don't know what the appropriate time would be, but I don't like leaving it without a timeline. I will not drag out the process over that issue, but I've raised it.
Okay, so you don't have a specific suggestion of how you'd like to see it change?
I wouldn't mind looking, I'm trying to look to the department a little bit, because I wouldn't want to come up with something that's totally unrealistic for them to complete it. I think the department has a better idea how long it's going to take to complete that process, but is a year enough? Is it? I don't want to handcuff you guys, but I would rather do a time. Okay, so I would recommend within a year.
Okay, Maria?
Okay, so I have to say that I feel pretty confident that a comprehensive audit will actually identify any barriers, and the OCYA is going to complete the sharing. So we've already said previously that every 6 months we're going to get a response from the OCYA. So to me, I think it all ties in.
This has, I don't think this has anything to do with the OCYA. This is us, within the scope specifically, we were supposed to come up with a recommendation on the communication between the departments, the tools they use, electronic tools, the way computers communicate. The case that brought us here was because the law enforcement agency couldn't open up the electronic files. That's what this recommendation is associated with. So the OCYA certainly would be part of that, particularly how they receive information. But this is an audit amongst the department. Basically, what we decided was instead of us telling the department how to do this, we are instructing them to go find out what's wrong and come back and make sure that they come forward with recommendations on how to fix it internally, because it would be way beyond our ability to be able to investigate it, which is why we would go to the recommendation of an audit. So I think there are two separate issues, but maybe I'm reading it wrong, but that's the way I remember it. But if we are calling specifically for an audit, I would still, I think a year, the department seemed quite comfortable with that. I actually didn't see much objection to it, so I would still recommend a year.
Okay, so is that wordsmithing happened up there? The audit would have,
Yeah.
okay. So everybody wants to vote on that one? They're good with the year? Okay, got lots of greens. All greens, greens in Calgary? It's all green, okay. So we're good on that change. And were there any other concerns? Rick, you had your yellow up there, you got covered?
I'm good now, thank you. I appreciate your accommodating my slow mind.
No problem. You're accommodating my inability to see, so. Let's just do one final vote on the information sharing. Everybody good? Got all greens? All greens, perfect. Let's move on, we have consensus. Internal quality assurance and transparency. Ready to vote?
No, wait.
Okay, let's vote. Okay, we've got, what am I seeing in Calgary? Yeah, we're voting. Okay, looks like one yellow in Calgary. Two yellows here, okay. Calgary, you want to go first?
I'm just not sure what a standardized QA procedure is.
Quality assurance.
Yeah, but what is that? What is a standardized quality assurance procedure? In other words, I'm sorry if I'm being obtuse, I just don't know what the language really means in terms of, if I was the deputy minister receiving this, I don't know that I would know what I'm being asked or told to do.
Something seems to, I recall the department saying that they do have a process that they use for quality assurance, but maybe that's, I don't know if somebody from the department could enlighten us?
You're correct, Madam Chair. They did say a process, but to me, a standardized process is one that has undergone some kind of review, is used across various jurisdictions. What they described is they have an internal process that they use. But we don't know that it's been standardized, or we don't know that it's been proven to be effective. We just know that they have an internal process.
Okay. Cam, did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be willing to maybe take that out if that helps clarify, but my wife is actually a quality improvement coordinator, and there's a whole field of quality improvement. I don't really know what she actually does, but she has a
Whatever it is,
somehow she improves the quality.
It's really important in a piece of rent.
Yeah. So if
Could you just text your wife and ask for the language, please?
So I don't know if that helps, but I know that there's a well-defined field of quality improvement and quality assurance. So if that helps at all, that'd be great. Or otherwise, if you want to take that out, I could live with that too.
We can get rid of the standardized.
How about a quality assurance process that is transparent and reported
That would
to
answer
the
my concern.
to somebody, to the OCYA, to the public, so that we can all see what the process is.
Okay. It's coming up on the screen.
Okay.
and the public.
Transparent and public?
If it's transparent, I guess it is including in the public, but you want it to be more specific. It should be reported outside of the internal process is what I'm asking, yeah.
Okay. Does that look like what you're getting at on screen?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
So if I may.
Yes?
In other parts of this document, we refer to internal process and internal reviews and external reviews. I would probably be inclined to say something like that the internal review focuses on quality assurance and uses a process that's transparent to the public.
Is that Patty?
That is Patty. So the internal review focuses on a quality assurance process that is transparent to the public.
Uses or focuses on?
Focuses on, or focuses on quality assurance and uses a process that is transparent to the public.
And uses a process, okay.
I can live with that. Okay.
All right, is that looking like? Okay, we got it on the screen. Everybody's seeing some head shaking. Let's vote on this one. Okay, we got all greens here.
And just get rid of the second process. Can you bring it back up on screen? Uses the process that focuses on quality assurance and transparent to the public. Okay, thanks.
Okay, we're good. All green in Calgary, all green here. We've got consensus. Okay, and now we had
I was yellow.
a yellow, okay.
But my yellow was all about, if this was quality assurance and transparency, and it never mentioned transparency,
Yeah.
but now it does.
Now you got it, so you're happy.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was
And
me
that
as
was yours,
well, Madam
Jason, as
Chair.
well. Okay, so as amended, this recommendation, let's vote. Okay, we got greens, we got greens, we got greens. We have consensus. Wonderful. Okay, I think we're on our last one.
All in favor?
Balancing public transparency and privacy. Okay, we're ready to vote? Okay, we've got some yellows and some greens. Okay, Calgary. Calgary hasn't voted yet?
Order reading.
Okay.
You're a taskmaster, I'll say it.
Well, we've got 5 minutes left in our schedule, so I'm trying to get us out of here on time.
Oh, that's the chair's,
Good job.
that's the chair's job.
Okay. Calgary ready to vote? Okay, I'm seeing greens. All right, Nicole, you had a yellow?
Yes.
Okay, you want to go first?
So I look at the yellow, and I thought from the last meeting that we agreed on a 30-day plan,
It's in there.
but not a 6-month timeline. I believe that we really, really need to do a comprehensive consultation. We need to make sure that we hear from, there's so many people, from families, from Indigenous communities, from reporters, the media. And I think we just need to do a really comprehensive consultation, and I don't agree with the 6-month timeline. I do agree with the 30-day plan timeline, but not the 6 months.
6 months is too, not long enough?
I don't think it's long enough.
So
But
could,
I think to do a comprehensive, just a plan, not a plan, sorry, consultation.
to a year?
I don't think 6 months is long enough.
If we said 6 months to a year, we should ask the staff, I guess, right?
the one question I got though, I hear what you're saying, is are we then saying that we're totally punting this out of our process because we are going to be done before 6 months under our mandate?
Well, I think we
So
can,
are we just tabling this and tossing it to somebody else and saying, we're not going to complete this portion within our mandate. I'm not saying that's wrong, I'm asking the question though, because our mandate ends before 6 months, and it certainly ends before a year.
I think that we can provide them with the principles of what we've come up with as seeing what we want the consultation to include. So like, we clearly identify what principles we want to be evaluated, right? So we want to make sure that we look at the impact on families, the supports that they need, making sure that we're balancing the accountability and transparency with the privacy. So I don't think we should leave the table without those being the guiding principles for the consultation, but I don't think necessarily that we need to have that say in the consultation piece, other than providing the key principles that we've already talked about for that.
And Rick, you had your hand up. I was just going to comment before that, though. It occurs to me, if we're doing a plan of 30 days, after we see that plan, would there not be a better position to then perhaps say what the timeline might look like? So go ahead, Rick.
Yeah, I was going to say, if we're going to extend the timeline past 6 months, then you got to add in a provision for reporting back so it just doesn't get lost in the ether. You know, in the day-to-day goings on.
Rick is correct, but Madam Chair, I actually think you're getting close to a good point. I mean, when the report comes back in 30 days, this body will still be sitting. And at that point, we could establish the timeline, because it could be information within that 30-day report. So maybe what we should do is remove the 6 months altogether.
Yeah.
Rick is correct, there needs to be a report back, but that could happen after we receive the advice from the 30-day report, which I think is your point, Madam Chair.
Patty?
I disagree completely, because I feel like we have been reviewing the process of how we examine children's deaths, and we have not had that comprehensive of a consultation. And the issue that we are making recommendations for, we've done in 6 weeks. We've consulted. I don't know why the publication ban needs so much more consultation. I don't believe this issue is any more grave, any more complicated, complex than the issues that we're dealing with. I would say that at the end of this panel, we need to have a strong, firm recommendation. It's within our mandate and it's important. And once we disband, it's done. Nobody is going to come back to this in a way that we will. I would strongly urge this panel to take it upon ourselves to consult widely in the time that we have and come up with a recommendation. Ask those pointed questions if we need to of families, make sure the right people are coming up in our hearings, but I would hope that we could finish this process. It's important, and I think that the way that the legislation is right now, families are being treated in a really disrespectful manner in making them go to court to put a publication ban. In my mind, if we were really thinking about family and family-centered process, it's exactly the opposite of how it should be. So I'm beseeching this panel that we come up with a recommendation by the end of our sitting.
I can support that.
Nicole?
I think because we don't have consensus on this, perhaps we can defer this conversation to after we have the actual plan from the department. Is that something that you can live with?
Honestly, I'm struggling, so let me think about that.
I would like to take Patty's recommendation as a motion. Can we put that on the floor?
Well, we're working with a consensus model, so I think I don't want to vary from that at this point.
So can we find out who's in consensus with Patty
Yeah.
and go from there?
Yeah, I think we would have to do it as a kind of a consensus base and see if we've got.
So Patty, you want this 6-month timeline to stay? Is that what you're saying?
No, I wanted to say that by the end of this panel proceedings, in our final report, we will have a firm recommendation on the publication ban. That's what I would like it to say.
I support that.
Okay, so.
We may have consent. What I'm saying is that we may have consensus on that.
Okay.
We won't know until we ask.
Yeah, have we got the wording, any changed wording? So what you're essentially, I understand it, that you would leave the 30-day piece, that we're going to get the plan, and then say something about by the end of the panel's mandate.
Which is less than 6 months.
Yes.
So it's less
Yeah.
than
By
what
the
they
end of the
originally
calendar.
recommended. Okay.
I guess, Nicole, my struggle is that we have managed in 2 months to get through a very complex discussion about the death review process. And I think we leave a very undone piece around supporting families in the publication of their details. I think we leave that as a very unfinished piece if we don't get this done within our mandate. So I think that if we can do what we've done in 2 months, that I think that this is achievable within the mandate of the panel.
I agree.
Okay, so we got those words on the screen there yet? People with good eyesight?
Yes.
Okay, can we vote on that changed wording then?
Yes.
Okay. I've got greens and I've got 2 reds. And,
You guys were all green 5 minutes ago.
okay. So, reds, do you want a chance to state suggested wording or change?
Well, I hesitate because at the last meeting, we talked about having a consultation plan, and we agreed that that was this process rather than setting out the timeline. So I can't, and the duration of this process is less than the 6 months that was originally proposed as reasonable. So I can't agree with
But there was no 6 months that we agreed to last Thursday.
No, but that's what's in here, and we agreed to a 30-day plan, so that we could look at the
Yes.
plan and then make a decision from there. So until we have the consultation plan for them to say, can we thoroughly explore the publication done? Because I hear what you're saying, we've done great work during this short timeline with the death review process. I just feel that this is a piece that hasn't been thoroughly discussed. And my understanding of phase 2 isn't that it's all focused on publication done. So I personally would like to see the consultation plan before we commit to a timeline today.
I think the issue on last Thursday slightly was, I think, one, we did a tremendous amount that day. And it got towards the end of the day, and I think what we all realized is that we had not been provided, I'm not saying on purpose, but we had not been able to get enough information to be able to answer this question. And so we were trying to come up with a way to buy time, but still be able to report on the first phase, but to accurately do this on the second phase. And so, I guess I'm with Patty now, re-looking at it, I think it's within our mandate to do, it's our responsibility to do it. And by punting it for 6 months to a year, we're essentially handing it off to an undetermined group that we don't even know if it's going to pick up the ball and finish it. So I actually think we were probably wrong even suggesting the 30 days. That was the wrong way to do it. I think what we should have said was that we needed to move this to second phase because we had not had adequate time to be briefed on the privacy issues and the legal issues, or at least the panel did not feel that they've been adequately briefed to make a decision.
Cam, you want to comment?
I think I'm sort of supporting what Jason said in a way to move it to phase 2, but agreeing with Nicole that we're going to get a plan presented to us in 30 days. And I'm not comfortable deciding on a timeline until that time. So by the time we get the plan in 30 days, we're going to be in phase 2 talking about this kind of stuff. So I'm with Nicole that we should defer the timeline decision until phase 2.
But the issue, Cam, is if we just defer the timeline decision and we leave this with telling the department to come back with a plan to do a consultation in 30 days, that is no longer what Patty's talking about, and I agree with her. I think we made a mistake when we said that. We need the department to come back to us and give us the information that we need to be able to make this decision. People around this table do not feel they've been adequately briefed on the law and heard enough from the people that are involved to be able to make a proper recommendation. But I don't want to leave it in this document saying that this group is not going to make that recommendation. We've been given that responsibility. It's clearly in the scope. I agree completely with Patty. And by leaving it, just telling the department 30 days to give us a plan to consult, I don't think it's adequate. I think we should actually go a whole different way. We should tell the department that we need the whole process on this to be adequately briefed, and then we can make a decision on what we can do.
If I could just comment, it occurs to me that by saying that it would come back to the panel, because essentially you're saying you want to make sure that this panel deals with the matter once we've got the report. So making a recommendation isn't predicting what that recommendation will be. The recommendation might be that you need more information, you might need more time, we don't know what it's gonna be at that point. It's just saying really that this panel will come up with a recommendation.
Agree, Madam Chair, but the first sentence, and it was us, we did this at the end of the day last Thursday.
Yeah.
But the first sentence is saying that the department's gonna come back to us in 30 days to outline a plan for a department-led consultation. And what I hear at least half the panel saying right now is, no, we don't want the department to do a lead consultation. We want, unless they think they can get it done before the end of this mandate, I guess that would be a different conversation. We want the panel to make recommendations on this still, but we need more information from the department in order to be able to make those recommendations. So I don't know if we should be asking the panel to come back with a report in 30 days no more. In my view, that's not what we're trying to ask. We're trying to say we're not ready to do this in first phase, but we don't want to stop first phase. But we need to.
You want the panel to be responsible for a
We still need to be responsible for it, so we need to settle the privacy portion. So essentially, we're saying we want to table this.
Okay.
But it has to be completed by the end of second phase. I think that's what I hear Patty saying, and I agree with you.
Yeah. But for today, we're gonna just defer.
Patty, can you live with that?
I can.
All right, so,
To deferring it without, yeah.
and we're still including the 30-day report that we would get for the second phase, so that everybody's okay with that wording? And then deferring the rest of that to phase 2? So do what we have up there, does it kind of reflect what we're talking about, or do we just want to defer the whole thing? Yes, Cam?
Well, I just was going to ask the question, do we, originally we started with that the ministry would come to us in 30 days with a plan, but that's missing from what's up there. So do we still want the 30-day plan?
Plan will be
Provided. No, it's still there. Yeah, first sentence.
Oh, sorry, I missed it. I was looking at the green part.
So I'm sort of confused because I don't understand why it would take the department 30 days to tell us why they would, or how they would consult on this. And so that confuses and bothers me. On the other hand, if we were to say, bring us some recommendations in 30 days around the publication ban, that would make sense to me. But I don't know why it would take a month to tell us how you would consult. It just seems like that's stretching this issue out too long.
From what I recall of the conversation, we were unsure how much information we need, so this was just kind of a window, and I think within 30 days, it could be less, right? And then just as long as, and whenever we can schedule it in our next segment will also be a factor, right?
I think the way that it was written in the first column, it might be helpful. Free to consult and return within 30 days with a timeline, advice, and recommendations on the publication ban.
Okay.
So they're coming back with recommendations within a 30-day period.
Okay.
Yeah.
I agree, just go back to that other, I agree with you, Bruce, go back to that first statement.
Cut and paste that, put it in, and we're good to go.
Okay.
With the first statement, so yeah. Good.
All right, looks like we got that piece there. Everybody's good with that? You wanna?
Hang on, there's a whole bunch of words here.
No, a whole bunch of words?
Sorry.
I can't see, what can I say?
Yeah, there's a lot of words, I promise.
Sorry, the issue I have in relation to the recommendations here is like, the biggest challenge we had with the publication ban was the fact that the people we're hearing the main concerns were from Indigenous groups, and I don't want to rush that engagement.
Well, that's what we're saying.
So trying to have recommendations in 30 days sounds unreasonable on my end, because I don't know if we can get that proper feedback from our Indigenous groups in that time limit.
Well, I think though that we'll see the recommendations from the department in 30 days, but then we have the balance of our time in our public consultation process to put those out to test with the people who are coming before the panel before we make a final recommendation.
So you were testing recommendations that are coming from, because the last thing I want to be doing is coming to Indigenous groups with information and making it seem like we're telling them.
No, I think the idea is the department gives us some feedback on how the publication ban could be changed or could be managed, and we would allow then the Indigenous groups or other groups coming to talk with the panel an opportunity to give us their thoughts on those recommendations.
Or other recommendations.
Or other recommendations. Or the other option is to say, we will defer this entire thing to phase 2 and ask throughout phase 2 that all groups coming before the panel make commentary on the publication ban.
So if I may.
Sorry,
Oh,
I didn't gather up. So the feedback is, so we're having the department, what you're saying is having the department to develop some recommendations from what they're seeing on their end.
And then we would ask the public to comment on those. Or the other option is to say, we'll put this entire issue into phase 2, and we will ask bodies coming to the panel in phase 2 to also talk about the publication ban.
Patty, you had a comment?
Yeah, I agree, and I think that we are in phase 2 going to be looking at the entire child intervention system. If this panel thinks this is the most complicated thing we're going to come across, that would be a misunderstanding. Every single issue that's going to come before us is incredibly complex. The publication ban is just one of those things, and yet we are tasked within 6 months to make recommendations to improve, strengthen, and fix some real issues perhaps in the child intervention system. So I think we're belaboring this. This is one of many complex issues, and Indigenous communities are going to have a lot to say about this and many, many other things. So I think if we put it to phase 2, and what Peter's saying makes a lot of sense, that's all we really need to say, but we have to have a recommendation at the end of this.
Agreed.
Right. So what I'm gathering, everybody then is saying that they're good with still getting the report that we've asked for within the 30-day period, and then we'll deal with this in phase 2. That sounds like we've got some agreement on that.
Well, other than that, I just want to make sure I understand what I'm agreeing to. Like, are we agreeing to what's in green or all of that, or?
Yeah. Sorry.
There's a lot going on there.
What we said earlier, just so I'm clear, and maybe I'll just test this out with the group if I may. Apologies for jumping in here. We like the first column.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the answer.
And so I know we've got a whole bunch of words up on the screen, but I'm just wondering if we can maybe kind of pause and park all the words that are on the screen and just move to finding a way to having a look at that's the one.
There we go.
Fabulous. Thank you very much. Whoever, I have no idea who's typing, by the way. I assume
You're doing
they're in this
great.
room.
Really good job back
Miracle
there.
of technology.
I think that is what Patty and them are saying. I agree.
Yeah, that we should perhaps test that and see how that.
Okay. Well, let's do that. Everybody want to vote on that? Okay, we still got 2, 3 reds. Calgary? Oops. Is that a yellow?
Those are green.
Green? Green?
That's a yellow.
And a yellow.
That's a yellow.
It's hard to see.
Wishful
Yeah.
thinking, sorry.
Okay, so.
I'm sorry, could we have the wording back up again? I think there's one thing that bothers me here. Yeah, we don't have the second piece in there, which is to request input throughout phase 2 from the public.
Oh, and that's consulted with affected groups.
But that's putting the ministry consulting.
Once the panel has been adequately briefed, and then we consulted with the affected groups, then we'll make a recommendation.
All right, okay.
All right, so just a reminder, we're already past
All
our
right, sorry,
scheduled.
that's
No, I agree.
disappeared from the screen so fast.
Okay, we're struggling with this, and this is kind of what happened.
Me too.
This is kind of what happened last time, so we need to
Question.
move along here. So
We've got a yellow card here, though.
Yeah,
you still got a yellow card, and we still got some reds here and some greens. So I think what we need to do is, we're gonna have to just defer this piece. If everybody's good with that, and we'll deal with it in phase 2, because I don't wanna run into everybody's time here any further tonight. I think we've done a fabulous job reaching consensus on all of these other ones.
Can I just understand what that means, Madam Chair? I don't disagree with your decision. Just, does that mean we're going to say we deferred this and we're dropping all the language? Perfect. So that's what the document will say. Defer to the next panel meeting?
We'll come back next
Okay,
week.
thank
Yeah.
you.
Could we get, Chair, please, the Secretariat to email what was on the screen to all of us, like right now, before it's changed or cleaned up? Because that's always our anchor point, is what we've all as a group agreed to. So if we get that anchor point emailed to us all right now, then when the secretariat has to mess with it before the next meeting, we'll know where our anchor point is that we have to get back to if necessary, please.
They don't have internet, but they will send it to us unchanged, right? As soon as they get connected.
Unchanged.
Okay, all right, so
Okay,
that's what
lovely.
they've said. All right, Nicole?
And can we just add on the last one that it was deferred because of disagreement? Like, I don't know.
Failure to reach consensus.
Yeah, that's the word.
Yeah.
Deferred or lack of consensus.
Lack of consensus.
Good reframe.
We don't disagree here, we just failed to consent.
That's a good reframe, team.
All right, there we go. So we need to very, very quickly move along here. I think we've done a fabulous job tonight. Just keep hitting this one sticking point. So, for the next meeting, did you want to very briefly speak to that, Cheryl?
No, we can defer to the next meeting, Chair. I don't
Okay.
want to devalue the conversation.
Sounds good. Okay, I think we've got a lot in our minds here. So all of this information, we know how you're going to be receiving it. You'll get the immediate information tonight as on screen, and then we, as usual, will have a summary. So I want to thank everybody for your hard work tonight, and I thank you so much for helping us get through phase one.
Can I,
Means a
can I
lot.
just make a comment, like when looking at the schedule coming up?
Yes.
If we are meeting, can we make those meetings at least 4 hours? Like, once we're here, I find, the first half hour, whatever, we're kind of all settling in and we get to really good work. And then maybe after lunch, like if it's a full day, that's fine, but an hour and a half at a time, and our colleagues from Calgary don't come down, and some of this is about the relationship building in the panel to reach consensus. So just, if we could have at least 4-hour chunks together, I'd really appreciate that.
My plan is to take all of you up to high level. We'll have 8 hours in the bus. Yes, Jason.
And I would appreciate if at the beginning of our next meeting, we could have some time for the panel to discuss a quick review of how the first phase went as far as operations, and anything that the panel thinks that they're going to need for the second phase that we might be able to
Sure.
make it more effective.
Great idea.
That would be beneficial.
Okay, sounds good. All right. Any other final comments here? Our next meeting will be April 19th from 7 till 8:30, and we'll go from there. Okay, anybody?
Sorry, Chair, this is just for my own organization. Can the Secretariat just resend out all the dates that we have for the next couple months? I remember it coming out and with the question, are these okay? But I wasn't too sure if they were confirmed or not.
Sounds good. Okay. So, good evening. Thank you, everybody. We'll
I
see you
just
next
got
meeting.
an email from Kim. She just got home, and she said the road was fine from here to Red Deer.
Have you Red Deer?
To Red Deer's fine.
What's it like after Red Deer?
I don't know.
She didn't travel that far.
I'll find out.